Set things up for the next panel, which is something that I think is very interesting for a lot of people. How to ship a top-tier game without a top-tier budget. Practical tips on cost-effective live service game development. So I guess I can welcome to the stage Thomas Huxter from Raptor PR, Teemu Haila from Metaplay, Christof Wegmann from Photon Engine, Riku Rakkola from Future Run, and Juho from Phantom Gamelabs.
Hello, hello, everybody. We're very lucky today to have some grizzled veterans of the games industry. Introverts had to be given a beer just to get up on stage today. So we're going to be talking about cost-effective ways to create top-tier gaming content and scale it. Obviously, cost-effective is a subjective thing, but working within the resources that are available to you. I'm Thomas Huxter. I'm going to be moderating. I'm director at a UK-based B2B PR agency for the games industry. And yeah, please, everybody, introduce yourselves.
Super briefly, hey, Teemu, nice to meet you, co-founder, chief product officer at Metaplay. My background is in games. I had a studio called PlayRaven that was acquired by Rovio. I host a Leadership Day games conference a couple of days ago, a Lifetime Award from IGDA, that sort of thing.
I'm Chris. Pleasure to meet you all. I'm founder and CTO at Exit Games, better known for our product Photon. Started the company in 2003, so 22 years ago. Yeah, that's it.
Hi, I'm Riku Rakkola, CEO of Future Run Games. We started a couple of years ago, and we're building a multiplayer sports game at the moment, and obviously using a lot of the technology that these guys represent. So.
And hi, my name is Juho. I'm from Photon Gamelabs. I'm a game programmer. We've been around 3 years now. Our second game, Riftbusters, went global last month. We built that for a couple of years, and now we are building something new. And well, I'm doing a little bit of everything with the small team we have.
Awesome, yeah. So again, blessed to have people here who have all built something, scaled something, both on the tech side and also, the gaming content side. So if we dive right into it, guys, from your track record, either with your, existing role or previous roles, what are some examples of where you've worked within, the resources that are available to you, whether you've bootstrapped or just been very cost conscious and made decisions that have had long-term positive ramifications. And I'll open that to the floor, whoever wants to take that first.
Well, maybe I can go first. So a little bit backstory. I used to run a mobile games company called Raplight Games for 13 years, and that was my first company. So obviously, I made a lot of mistakes there, which I tried to learn from, of course, for the second company that I now run. And I think starting this company, I had a very different mindset than the previous one. So previously, of course, I started the company because I wanted to make games for a living. And I had a lot of friends that were also in the gaming business. And we just wanted to basically build something of our own. And of course, later on, when we got funding, we didn't really know, where to spend that properly in a way that we sometimes were the most cost conscious, of course, with some of the decisions. I think the biggest mistake early was hiring too early. As I've been thinking that a lot because sometimes you hire too late, but I think I made the mistake of hiring too early. So with the new company, I wanted to be very cost conscious of only hiring the smallest team possible, which means that we all have to wear many hats, basically. And also, some of the things that we did, for example, was that we are not going to get any office in the early stage. The first year, we only were in this small, basically like a hotel room that cost like €1,000 a month. And I think that was a good decision to kind of keep the minds of the company very scrappy in the early days. And also, of course, the personnel is always the biggest cost factor. But I realized that we have to hire senior guys, so we couldn't go really low on the salaries, but instead we can kind of limit the headcount very much. So that's what we did. So I think that those things, just trying to keep all the things scrappy, was a really big thing for the second company.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just maybe chip in to say that, yeah, it seems to be, this is actually a topic we discussed in Leadership Day as well, that like turns out one of the learnings when you do multiple studios in a row is to realize that using money effectively is really hard. So it's actually like a senior thing to try to go as far as possible with as little money as possible, because then it gives you the least amount of surface area to just kind of end up spending time and money on things that actually didn't matter. Like constraints, a really good thing.
How much does that, you know, for you, Teemu and Riku, how much does funding, I guess, change the dynamic? I mean, I think you alluded there, Riku, you know, when you've raised some money, you know, potentially that might change the dynamic when compared to when you feel like every, you know, penny might be coming out of your pocket. I don't know. How does that change the dynamic?
Yeah, raising money is, of course, one thing I learned about raising money is I raised like 5 rounds for the previous company, totaling like 15 million. And when you start like, usually you want to get the biggest seed round possible, or at least that's the mindset that I hear from a lot of first-time founders. That okay, the seed round needs to be big enough so we can really have like at least 2 years of runway, 3 years of runway, hire X amount of people. But what I did for the second company was I realized I want to try to raise the least amount of money that I can. So that was actually one of my pitch. I said to the investor that I want to have the least amount of money possible. And the whole mindset was that usually if you raise like a couple of million, the investor expects you to get to the point of, let's say, a soft launch. And then you start to launch more, raise more money to actually, you know, do UA, kind of like grow the game. But what I wanted to do was to basically prove the team first. And if the investor is not happy at that point, that we don't have fast enough velocity, I would just shut down the company. And that was kind of a risk, but what that enabled is that the actual second round, the proper seed round, was with a bigger valuation than it would have been in the first. So that's kind of like a gamble, but I took it with the second company.
Awesome. Juho, Christof, what are your cost-conscious stories that you're proud of?
Well, if I continue from there, well, obviously I'm not a part of a founder team, so not much to say about bootstrapping, but yeah, I totally agree, like keeping the team as small as possible, like reducing all the bureaucracy there, not many meetings to do, and basically maybe from tech point of view, I would say like how to make things simple is cowboy coding. So basically no fancy Git flow, doing things like push everything to master, no code reviews, whatnot. Things are super simple when you are only seniors. You don't have to do a lot of back and forth talking about the code. You can just ship it, code. There's the focus.
Christof, what do you think?
So yeah, we are around quite a long time. So I started Exit Games as a company name. Almost nobody knows, probably. We are more famous for Photon. So we had a first live, the first 10 years. We actually built a backend. So we raised about 8 or 9 million to build a product called Neutron. And it was a time where everybody was using Nokia phones. So there was no iPhone. There was just 90% on the planet was Nokia. And we already worked with a lot of the Finnish companies were already really shining back in the day. So there was Rovio, there was Sumea, which later became Digital Chocolate, and it was a great time. So we had that idea to build a backend for mobile games because we thought mobile phones would ultimately be connected and that people would play together. So the idea was very good. I still think it was a great idea.
Crazy talk.
Just the timing was horribly wrong. So that was maybe the biggest learning for me at that point, that that's a great idea, but if the market is not really sucking in your product, so it always felt like we had to kind of sell the product and go to all the conferences, talk about it. We got projects, but it was never really taking off. So after 10 years, we had to sadly, fold, or your investors, after 10 years, it's a magic number where they will ask you, okay, it's time to sell the company and try to make money, of our investments. So
10 years, that's a lot of grace to get, I would have
yeah,
thought.
so we got along with like 8 million is a lot of money, right? But it's with a team of whatever, 30 people, it's not so much eventually if you're not making a lot of revenues. We had an office in San Francisco, really full speed. Eventually, yeah, it didn't work, so we had to do something else and went into M&A. Nobody wanted to buy us, still crying a bit. But eventually we bought back the company and then we pivoted into real-time multiplayer. And this time it was a good idea, it was the right timing, Unity was just starting to become a thing back in the days, which is, I think, a lot of people here are benefiting from what Unity started with, building the first free game engine. So Unreal was pretty much unaffordable for most companies. And so that was a timing thing, and we were lucky as well to buy a shell and a team at that point for a very low amount of money. Basically, the investors were kind of suffering there, and then it eventually worked.
So that example, Christof, obviously was more of a case of kind of timing, but do any of you have an example of, now where you still lie in bed at night and you just go, oh, fuck. That was a decision I took that has had, long-term ramifications that were unanticipated.
So you mean in terms of spending money that didn't turn out to be any valuable? I think we started to have a culture of making mistakes and making wrong decisions. So it's not a problem even to spend money. But what we learned was to stop things that were wrong fast enough and to change direction really quickly. It's still, I think, something that we are very good at. One thing, we had this huge success with Stumble Guys, which was kind of an accident, right? So we could not really repeat it. So we thought, oh, maybe it's a good idea to invest or to fund game projects. So we did that with 4 studios. We invested like 600, 700,000, something like that. We didn't get any return on investment. Was it a waste of money? I don't think so. I think it was invested great in these teams. Would I do it again? With different teams.
How about the rest of you guys? Any costly fuck-ups?
Yeah, I can share one. So one that annoys me to no end is back in the PlayRaven days, my own previous studio, we had an amazing team that was able to build very, very high quality games, but kind of realized too late that they really only were amazing at building the game that they can see and feel. So anything that wasn't on the build was not sort of taken into account when like balancing things or designing UIs. So we focused a lot on the core gameplay, completely ignored the long-term retaining systems, guilds, progression, in-app purchases. We knew we were going to build them, but they weren't in the build. So then the game was completely not balanced. Like the first player experience is amazing, but there was no bridge to the 10th session or the 1 month gameplay, or like how do you introduce these systems? So like the learning there would have been get these systems in earlier so the team naturally just ends up polishing the game earlier. So that took a lot of time and money to fix, essentially.
I thought you were going to say hiring a B2B PR agency was your biggest. Anybody else? What are decisions that you maybe don't regret but have learned from?
Yeah, definitely. If I'll continue from that, this goes back in the days in my junior 9 years. We were like basically we started from school, went to a company, started making a new game there, and we were making this hero shooter type of game. There wasn't many of those back in the day, and we were doing really cool stuff. We were actually using Photon Unity networking for a prototype, and things were going smooth. Everybody loved the game in the internal tests. But then came to a decision. We were still lacking on the art side of things, no monetization. or not, needed a little bit of polish that we could have pushed the game out. But for some reason, we decided to make a decision that this is not going to be really cost efficient. We saw that with the other game that Photon Windows servers, they were taking a little bit of money, and even though we didn't have a monetization whatnot yet in, we decided that yeah, we need to do things our own way, and we made the whole freaking game. Again, ECS was new thing, .NET Core just came out for Linux, and there were like a fancy stack that we started building. We hired some expensive senior guys to make our wishes come true, and we did some cool stuff, but obviously it costs a lot more. It took maybe a year longer, and well, eventually the whole game was killed because the team was needed for the other game because it started lacking on the money side. So, well, it was killed, never came out, and it's a really shame, but...
Mm-hmm. And Riku, you mentioned also hiring potentially too early. Anything else to look out for?
These things are tied together. So you talked about building technology or starting to build technology maybe too early, or picking, making something yourself that you could as well, take as a service. I think those are related in a way that we sometimes on the previous company, we hired a lot of people to be able to build something, and then the people, of course, stick with the company and they kind of float you, and then also the projects take a lot of time. So I think in aggregate, the biggest kind of like cost, or like a biggest cost that you can have, is building your own tech features that you don't necessarily need at the moment. And especially when you have a lot of engineers in the company, of course, who love to build new stuff, you kind of like end up with these situations where you have idle hands in the company sometimes, and then they start their own tech projects and they kind of bloat, and then, So it's very kind of like important to me now in this new company that we keep it small, we focus on what's current, we don't lean too much into the future. Because of course sometimes even the investors, they might pressure you that you have to prepare for scaling, prepare for big things in the future. But I think there's a risk of preparing too early and building these huge monolith technical solutions that when your game doesn't then work, you don't actually need them and you end up scrapping them. So those are a wasted money.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not too long ago, right, that mobile companies were building their own game engine in order to then build a game. And now we're in an era where there are a huge amount of tools available. What should relatively early stage companies, I guess, look out for in terms of the tools that are available to them? What kind of pricing structures should they look for? Is it free to start, pay as you grow type models? How do you make that decision at an early stage with all of the options available?
Well, maybe I can start. With this company, I was, even before raising the round and even actually before gathering the team, I had a game idea very clear in mind what I want to make with the next, or do with the next company. And one of the steps that I took was to go through the available technology, because on the previous company, so I used to be a programmer, that's my background, so I'm kind of now also doing that 95% of the time. But in the previous company, when we were bigger, like 30, 40 people, I wasn't programming anymore, so I had a hiatus of like 5 years that I didn't look at any of the current tech. So the first thing I did when I kind of left the company was to just take a few months off, and I started to downloaded Unity again, went through all the technical solutions that there are now. So I did quite a bit of due diligence. And when starting a new company, if you are the type of person that you can do that helps significantly, because then you know also the hires that you need to make, because you know the tech stack that you're going to be using. So I think that was a very good kind of like a good thing to do.
Yeah, no, at least what we see with our sort of most successful neighbors, customers, whatever you call it here in Finland, like clearly the people making the best choices over here are people who have a good idea of what they're gonna build, like where they're gonna end up, what are they can not necessarily articulate what they need, but like what kind of problem space. We're gonna have millions of players, hundreds of millions of players. We're gonna have, in-app purchase flows, yada yada. From there you can kind of break it down into, okay, here's the stuff we're gonna eventually need, but not day one. And then like basically say, cool, let's start with the prototype, real-time tech, Photon in, and then like work from there into Well, then we're going to build matchmaking systems and long-term retention systems. Cool. All right. Then we're going to need this piece of tech and so on. So kind of working backwards from actually what do you need to always prove the next step. And then, yeah, it's cool if you have free tiers like we have, but it's actually even more essential to just get the right tool for the job. And nobody ever throws any code away. That doesn't happen. So building on the thing that you can actually ship on rather than like, we'll figure it out later.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you guys look out for as a potential kind of red flag, I guess, in tool pricing structures? Is there anything you look at and go, that's absolutely not the play for us?
Well, obviously you need to mention the install-based fees and yeah, Unity. Thank you. Other than that, it's really a red flag if you are not sure like what's going on. They are not transparent, like where the costs come from. So like transparency definitely important at that end.
Yeah, I think from my side, the price, like depending on what is a good, pricing structure for any specific service or middleware that you buy, I think it depends also highly on the game that you're building. For example, if you're expecting to build a low LTV ad monetized game with for example, a lot of install, a lot of CCU, but you're not expecting a lot of revenue per download, then of course some of the even Metaplay or Photon can be expensive solution to some of those games. But that depends solely on how you want to monetize and kind of like what are you expecting your player base to be. And sometimes you don't know that, of course. But I think the most important thing for me has been trying to select technologies or services that I know that can scale and the companies will be around, and even better if there's a kind of like a backup solution, meaning that if something happens to the service provider, how we're going to replace that, or can we get access to the source code? Can we do something ourselves if something goes wrong? That's a big part of it as well. As an example, in a previous company, we were using this analytics platform that later got sold to a big gaming company, and they stopped like on 1 week notice, and we had been building months and months of work and only relying on that analytics service, and it shut down literally in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, let's not mention Omniata by name.
Yeah,
I used the same thing.
I was trying to avoid it, but yeah, maybe you said it. But yeah, that's sometimes quite costly, obviously, and it causes a lot of frustration because then you have to rethink your stack in a few weeks, and that's not easy. So.
I think one life hack on the pricing stuff, everything's obvious in hindsight, but basically pick services that scale based on concurrence, based on daily actives, so usage. Because in the beginning, when you're developing, you don't have any money or you don't want to spend the money, then those services are basically free. Like we are able to give out everything we have for free, that we spend tens of millions developing, and then the cost goes up only when you actually have a game that's, has a lot of players, that has a business going on. So that's how you de-risk the beginning part of your development, where you're the most kind of insecure about spending money on it. So that's a good one.
Yeah, success is never a problem. So that's my experience. So it's a problem if you're not successful, right? And you just fear cost. So if you would be successful and not make money and you couldn't pay, for example, Photon, you could always come to us and we would find a solution, because ultimately success leads to revenue and everybody wins. I think you couldn't have that conversation with Amazon probably, but with Metaplay or Photon, so you could always meet us on conferences or pick up the phone. We get rarely phone calls, by the way. But sometimes.
And how does this decision making around, what tools to use and when differ, I guess dependent on monetization models, kind of, lifespan of games? I know we're in an environment where we're moving towards games that ideally have a longer and evolving sort of product life cycle, but how do monetization models and sort of genres come into this decision making?
Well, I think Christof is right, of course, that you mostly, like in 95% of the cases, you need to worry about that the game never comes out or it fails. So that's kind of it's a small concern, of course, but I would still, of course, always do the calculation, which I did at, when starting this project, I calculated what would be the cost of Metaplay and Photon both with a certain amount of DAU, CCU, what kind of scenarios, how much LTV would the game need to make, per user to sustain that, and that not to be too much of a cost. And of course, the greediest parts of the funnel are always Apple and Google at the moment. So that is kind of like, but you can't do anything about that. But I mean, yeah, you still have to be mindful because those accumulate. If you use a lot of services, that's great because you will save time, but also those services, they all accumulate to the cost of the game. So just to give you an example, for example, attribution services, you sometimes don't look into it unless you do a lot of UA, paid UA. Then you start to figure out, they also take quite a bit per install. So if you're heavily relying on paid traffic, you end up paying the attribution cost, you end up paying whatever server costs you have, you pay Apple and Google, and just be mindful and calculate what is the bottom line there. So you know your LTV target by that way.
Yeah, I'll take actually a slightly different angle on the same thing, like thinking of genres and so on. So we mostly deal with live service games, right? So that means large player base, huge amount of content. You plan for like years and years of stuff in the game, and obviously you don't want to do that day one. You want to patch it in as you go. So nowadays we call it live ops and so on. So the cost of that is generally not in tech, but it's rather in your salaries, right? Like how expensive it is for you to ship that game. So then the real question is, okay, if we are in these genres, how can we push our own salaries down, let alone our own human resource costs down by using whatever generative AI on the assets or like very clever over-the-air like systems for templating events and like filling the game calendar with interesting content, all of that. And I think that's where like actually tool choice matters even more than in premium games, because that backlog is just so insanely large of stuff that you have to do. That's where we spend a lot of our time nowadays. But I think it's sort of almost the flip side of it. It's not what it costs, but like how can I even afford any of it in the first place?
Mm. So moving on, I think I was shocked and scandalized just before this panel to find out that most of you guys kind of work together and know each other. So, totally shocked at that. For you guys, Future Run and Phantom Gamelabs, what are some of your stories, I guess, of how you've used this, back-end tech, Metaplay, the multiplayer services cost effectively? How have you found that experience? What are any tips that you would have?
Well, one thing to say for sure is with Metaplay, for example, how we could really reduce the amount of programmers we need is that we can put everything to cloud, so we don't need like any infra guys or whatnot, because again, human resources tend to take a lot of money. So if a service provider can help there, and they have helped us there, it's a big plus.
Yeah, for us, as I mentioned earlier, that at least the kind of like tool selection, so picking the right tool for the job. Even Photon, you guys have different solutions for, depending on what kind of a game you're building. If you're building a super kind of like low latency game, or if you can, go with some other solution if you're building a strategy game or something like that. So of course, with all the service providers, I think it's even more important that the pricing is, of course, that do they have the features that you need for your game, and is it the right tool? And we've been very happy with the Metaplay and Photon stack, of course, because that fits our game at least at this moment very well. So
here.
And so it's about, I guess, what you're saying is it's about early decisions in, exactly what your game's roadmap looks like, what functionality it's going to have, in order to pick the right sort of tools and services in order to implement that.
Yeah, because it's very expensive to change. For example, that even if we're using Photon Quantum, so it's a great tool, but it's also would be very hard to then move to something else. So we wanted to be very sure from the early on that fits our game. So we actually tried. I tried Fusion as well, and some other options, but do some testing beforehand. I think that's very important. And obviously, to do that, you need to have a very clear understanding of what what is the game that you're building from the get-go. Even if you don't have the full design document, but you need to know the key features that you will need in the future.
Actually, another take on that, which is like related, but what we obviously talk about this a lot with our customers, like how do we ship faster, right? And one thing that is kind of surprising that we found is that like we do support our customers, as in we sit in Slack with these people, and you guys have the gaming circle as well. So that's a lot of times we basically ask, cool. What if we can help you design some of your systems or give you some feedback? Maybe you could avoid hiring a systems engineer, for example. Like maybe we can fill in some of the knowledge blanks in the team. And if I can drop 1 or 2 from your headcount, that's a huge save. Or sometimes just like help figure out what are you building, because nobody knows what they're building. That's a discussion, right? So maybe we can help with that. I think you guys are doing something similar with the circle.
Yes, we want to get developers in touch with our engineers. So and we came up with the idea it cannot be free because we have like 1 million subscribers. So it's very hard to know who is serious, who is making something serious, and who not. So we have a membership plan where you can basically enter and then you get access to all our key engineers. It's not like you get free consulting, but if you ask something very interesting, if you report problems, we will help you right away. And what you get nowadays with Metaplay and Photon, you get the best possible tools and you can make an amazing game with a very small team. So I think we are both very proud of especially the small teams of 3, 4 very good engineers, but they can basically launch a game. Well, it still takes a long time to build a proper game, right? But yeah, it's insane. And the quality of our tools are most likely better than what you would get in EA or even Supercell ultimately, right? Which have internal tech, but that's not very good documented. It's not a good product. And important as well, from my opinion, is you don't want to use a tool which may go out of business, right? Which is heavily funded, but then is not successful, quote unquote. But again, Metaplay and us are like around since a long time. We are cash flow positive, let's say, and profitable. So we will be around in 5 years and 10 years from now.
Which to an extent begs the question, I guess, and I know part of it comes down to enjoying working with the tech and pride in building it, but it begs the question, why are companies still deciding to build functionality like a backend themselves?
Well, first of all, the biggest problem with game development is that it's fun. It's actually more fun to make games than ship games. I don't know if you've noticed.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, Riku, you mentioned you've got a background, I guess, in coding and things like that. Presumably, you feel like a point of pride in feeling that you've had a very strong guiding hand in the tech that you work with.
Yeah, and I think, for example, but just to give an example, in the previous company, we had around 40 people, which about 10 were on the back-end side and on the analytics side combined. So we had a 10-person team just solely supporting the back-end and the analytics. And the new company, we have none. So, and how is that possible is obviously using the external stuff. And you're right that building your own systems is fun. It's super fun. Great, but it also costs quite a bit. And then but I think it's a matter of why you asked why some companies are still building their own stuff, and it makes sense if you're a big company, because of course even that small cost that you can accumulate over time, and the good thing of course building your own tech that you can take it to any direction. You are completely free hands to do whatever. But I think that it doesn't make any sense for a smaller company to do that. But after certain, I've never worked in a really big company, and I don't know when does it start to make sense. But obviously, there's a cutoff point for everything that you need to do that. But
maybe obviously we've been thinking about this a lot, but it's the classic build versus buy argument, and really kind of boils down into what is your competitive advantage, right? Like Supercell makes their own client engine because they can shave milliseconds off of the load times. That's competitive advantage to them against Unity, against Unreal. I'm assuming that as a smaller indie team, that's not your KPI. Your KPI might be more like, I want to ship this game in the first place, or make a game that nobody has made before. So you need to focus on that one secret sauce, and everything else, just buy it. Just buy it. Focus.
I think many will obviously know, but many won't. With Metaplay and Photon, it's very difficult to change your back end, to experience a level of success, run into scaling troubles with a black box back end and then make a change in decision. Same with real-time multiplayer. It's kind of got to be a quite an early decision in the journey, or a very early decision in the journey. So what kind of tips would you, Christof, and you, Teemu, kind of offer to developers in terms of when to implement your tech, when to start thinking about it, and maybe also how the two kind of interact?
Very good question. So, of course, multiplayer is something you don't think in the second step, really, right? So multiplayer is kind of, either you build a multiplayer game or a single player game, usually. We want to get the pain out of the way. Do you start with a single player prototype because you're raising money? Yeah, of course, that makes sense, right, in the first step, potentially. But we want to make sure that you could start with a prototype multiplayer already and just go, and you don't have to run servers. And we are always there to even help. We do code reviews. We are there for discussions. So the quality in general, the quality of the teams, the quality of the games is going up all the time since I'm in this industry, right? And everything is extremely professional. The teams are getting smaller, budgets are getting tighter. So it's a lot about speed and success, and I don't want to flip, right? I'm quite happy building the shovels for the gold diggers. It's kind of our picture, right? So everybody needs the shovels, but gold is not really, not everybody's lucky to find that. But of course, we need the lucky games, right? So we are powering Peak, for example, which came out of nowhere. Well, the Landfall made one hit after the other, but everyone bigger than the previous one. And without a Peak, without a Rebo, without a Gorilla Tag, we wouldn't be able to survive. So we desperately need these teams to be successful. So we are on your team. We are not against you. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of similar as in like it's a complement, right? But the topic of today is save money. How do we do this thing on the cheap, right? So then, from my point of view, the cheapest thing you can possibly do is, pick the tools early, because it doesn't really take any extra time to develop on top of Photon or develop on top of Metaplay. It's not a slower way of making a game, but you're all the time kind of in an ambient sense learning the tools on the background, and then the tools maybe allow you to try stuff earlier at times, like go into real-time multiplayer testing immediately. Or maybe my pet peeve was go for the long-term retention systems immediately, persistence day one. So it's not mandatory, but if I were to now start a new gaming studio, I would sort of integrate everything day zero and then start prototyping around, even if the prototype is going to go away, because then that's going to be the cheapest, fastest way to play test. Mm-hmm. Get the early numbers, get the sales pitch, whatever is my milestone.
Is there an element, Christof, you mentioned kind of digging for gold, striking gold. Is there an argument, I guess, that using the right tech at the right time and obviously being cost effective means, yes, we're all still looking for hits, but ultimately we may not need to strike such a mother load and have more titles be sustainable, than have been the case in the last couple of years?
Yeah, if I would know, I would probably do a studio. So we're happy just spreading our tech and just waiting for success. It's our thing.
Awesome. I'm going to open up to the audience if anybody has any questions. It's very hard to catch these guys any other time, so
make it hard. Something.
We've got time for one question.
What?
Bring it, make it hard.
Say Kubernetes in the question. Okay, if nobody has a question, I'm going to quick fire round. What's one quick fire cost saving tip that each of you would recommend to the audience today?
Well, I can start. Well, this is a boring one, and everyone should know this, but take care of yourself and your health, because there's no price tag for your health. And if your teammates burn out, whatnot, it's going to cost a lot of money losing the resources. The most important resources are yourselves.
Yeah, I would just say hire carefully.
Yeah, use free tools.
Yeah, and come ask me. As in somebody's done your game before or portions of it before, talk to your friends, we'll help you out.
Amazing.
Gentlemen, thank you so
appreciate
much.
guys. Yeah, thank you so much.
Big round of applause for the panel. All of you shy Finns that didn't want to ask any questions, you can find them outside in the hall afterwards.